Hello and welcome to another edition of East of Ethnia. This week I'd like to take a little bit of a different direction from what we have usually done. This is, of course, for the most part, a series of videos about culture and politics and society in Southeast Europe and the Balkans, but it is impossible not to be paying attention in the past several weeks to what has been happening in the United States. And I want to talk a little bit about that. What is happening in the United States? Well, over the last year, since a person began occupying the office of the President of the United States, you have seen the takeover and, in many cases, the destruction of institutions, in particular institutions designed to help and inform people. These include institutions like the Department of Education, like the United States Agency for International Development, the United States Institute for Peace, the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the Public Broadcasting System, and several of others. And you have at the same time seen the articulation of the main theses associated with global political movements like, let's call them what they are, racism and fascism coming from high places. You've seen it in the claims that promotion of work and education opportunities for members of minorities and promotion of diversity and equality is somehow illegal or should be forbidden. You've seen the complicity of universities and of the military in advancing these theses. You've seen high-ranking state officials. In one instance, making Nazi salutes, and in another case, speaking while putting on the podium in front of herself a prominent Nazi slogan, the slogan, "One of ours, all of theirs." Look it up, and you'll see how that's associated with the fate of the town of Lidice in the former Czechoslovakia. You have seen the global alignment of the United States with movements of the far right and movements for the promotion of political and ethnic violence association with the regimes of Hungary, of Russia, with the far right movements of Germany and France, far right parties in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. In the last several weeks, you've seen paramilitary occupation and violence, including the public commission of murders in one of the domestic cities of the United States. So we should not be ashamed or afraid to call things by their name. We have an obligation to be truthful and to call things what they are. This is paramilitary occupation directed against citizens of the country with the goal of spreading fear, paranoia, and mistrust, and justifying the commission of murder. Um, I say this, now let's return to Southeast Europe a little bit, because something similar and equally surprising happened in the former Yugoslavia, beginning in the early 1990s. This was in a society that thought of itself as progressive and peaceful, that cultivated an image of itself during the Cold War as in between the two blocs, not suffering from the totalitarianistic failures of either of the two main blocs of the Cold War. And as the conflict developed, you saw political movements developing and eventually taking power that promoted exclusivity, the casting of blame on members of other groups for the misfortune of one group, promotion of fear, of the fear that other groups were seeking to eliminate members of the home group, promotion of ideologies of elimination, suggesting that the solution to the problems faced by the group is the destruction of other groups. So this eventually resulted in the crimes that we know about from the conflicts of the 1990s: forced migration, large-scale organized sexual violence directed against members of particular ethnic and national and religious groups, massacres, eventually genocide. What are some things that we can say happened in common that are shared between the experience of this small region and a very large country that is going through this now? One of the things that you see on the positive side is there were people organizing all of the time that this violence was being promoted and that it was being happening. There were protests. There were people trying to diffuse violence, to reply to the rhetoric of hatred, to protect their neighbors, and you're seeing this in both places. You see in Minneapolis now, organized groups of people going out and bringing food to neighbors because for them, because of their appearance or identity, it is dangerous to do things as similar as ordinary as shopping. And the other thing that I think you see in common in both places is the promotion from high positions of the idea that the situation that is being faced is normal. People were, during all of the time that the violence was taking place, going to work, coming home and eating lunch. The media promoted language that tended to diminish the intensity and character of the violence that is going on, to reduce it to political conflict, to equalize the sides involved, to say that aggressors and victims were the same. To identify the forces committing violence with legitimate forces, to call them the government or the state, and so on. One of the things that happened in the region. I mean, there were intellectual movements of resistance throughout the region. I want to concentrate on just one, and that is the Circle of Independent Intellectuals of Belgrade, known more commonly as the Belgrade Circle, formed in 1992. So this was a group of people determined to reply to the promotion of hatred and violence, determined to show how strange it is, determined to encourage people not to simply live with it. And the most prominent figure, the person identified as the leader, if there was a leader of the Belgrade Circle, was a writer. He was one of the great 20th century Serbian novelists, Radomir Konstantinovic. And I want to just give you a few quotations from the address that he gave at the opening meeting of the Belgrade Circle in 1992. This was published in their anthology under the title Živeti sa čudovištem, that is, living with the monster. And here's what Konstantinovic had to say. Be indulgent with me. I am giving you a live translation here, and my translation is going to be kind of free. But he says, we are up to our necks in totalitarianism, and this totalitarianism is a contagion of violence, a tendency toward total violence, toward violence as a universal method against others, but also against ourselves, because totalitarianism is the totalization of violence. It conquers us. It perverts us, and it also perverts to the level of monstrosity everything that it touches. So he describes this as, perversions in every step of life. Um, these perversions of misdirection, of of hopeless disagreement in the in the service of totalitarian violence. And he goes on to say these flood our world. They take it over more, so much that they become normal, and then the monstrosity over in the places that have been hypnotized by violence, where everything is laundered in the liquid of violence. That monstrosity becomes ever more normal. So we live in the paradox of what he calls normal monstrosity. Um, the the fundamental expression of the paradox of monstrosity as normality. Um, and because of this, he goes on to argue. He says it is not just that every day we live in the midst of this normal monstrosity, and it's not just that we have become accustomed to monstrosity, but we have also made our peace with this. So we ourselves are turning into monstrosities. Um, Living under the violence of totalitarian nationalism means that day to day we accept that violence more, and we accept it as our own. We accept the unacceptable. We accept monstrosity as something natural, as natural monstrosity. And because of that, humanity, Konstantinovich says, when we encounter it, when we meet it, looks like something unreal. Um, because of that monstrosity, because it is so omnipresent, we hardly notice it. So living with monstrosity means not noticing it, not seeing monstrosity as monstrosity. And so Konstantinovich concludes, he says, totalitarianism makes people blind to monstrosity, but the most terrifying thing about it, the most horrifying thing about totalitarianism is that ever fewer things look as though they are terrifying. So this is what Vladimir Konstantinovich had to say about the coming to power of monstrosity and the acceptance of violence and turning violence into something normal in 1992. And it may sound a bit encompassing. It may sound a bit pessimistic. How do we deal with it? Well, Konstantinovich says that the answer for intellectuals is consciousness, that consciousness is the opposite of monstrosity and of totalitarianism. Karl Jaspers, in an earlier period, says it's the recognition that as humans, we share responsibility for all of the evil in the world. What would I say? I would say that both of these theses are partly right. What we need to do is to be aware of what is happening, to recognize what it is, to spread truth, to encourage awareness and critical awareness among the people around us. And finally, in the end, when we're dealing with the violence and ugliness that seems ever more to define everyday experience and to alienate us, drown the ugliness, drown the violence in the sea of beauty that we create by spreading knowledge and truth. I've turned this into a bit of a sermon, but I think there's something useful in looking at the past experiences, at drawing lessons, and in giving some reflection to how we experience this period, which really looks as though at times it's threatening to take us over. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'll talk to you later.